Hi everyone, welcome back to Studioloo. We're here for a little short story scraps today, and I wanted to read a little bit to you from this lovely book called Plant Dreaming Deep by May Sarton. May Sarton is the pen name of Eleanor Marie Sarton. She lived from 1912 to 1995, and she's a Belgian-American novelist, poet, and also a memoirist. Her best work is known to be very personal and erotic female imagery, but she resisted a lot of labels that people tried to put upon her, like a lesbian writer, often trying to have people see her as someone who likes to convey the universal topic of human love and a lot of life experience. So she was born in Belgium, as I'd mentioned, and she had really interesting parents. Like, her father was a science historian and her mother was an English artist. They lived through the experience of German troops invading Belgium and basically the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914, and they fled to England, lived in Ipswich, where her grandmother was from, and then a year later they ended up moving to the United States, settling in Boston, where her father started working at Harvard. So she got into theater in her late teens, but then really continued writing poetry throughout her adolescence, went to school in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and then basically she just continued on a literary journey, winning a scholarship, being drawn more into theater, and she just has been a very interesting and creative woman her whole life, really. She published a series of sonnets, she's done children's books, she was very engaging in the writers community. She met with different cultural figures such as Virginia Woolf, Elizabeth Bowen, apparently Julian and Juliet Huxley. And I saw this really funny note that she had actually had an affair with both of them. I think like a theme of feminism ran in her blood throughout her entire life. And that's part of what makes her such a outspoken, open, interesting woman. And her whole life, really, she was just a very good writer. And so she wrote till very late in her life. She wrote 53 books, 19 of which were novels, 17 books of poetry. She even wrote like 15 nonfiction books. So very intelligent, a couple of children's books and plays, screenplays. I liked that the Poetry Foundation very much valued her. They called her style calm, cultured, and urbane. And she was very politically conscious. I don't know what else to say. She was just a very cool woman. She did pass away from breast cancer July 16th, 1995, and she's buried in New Hampshire. She did have a stroke later in her life. When that happened, she was a bit debilitated, but she used a tape recorder to record and transcribe her journal, which was called Endgame, a journal of the 79th year. And that was in 1992. She also was published posthumously. And her final book was Coming into 80 in 1995, which was when she was published after her death. And she's just fascinating. So the book that I found of hers, Plant Dreaming Deep, I got it on a little thrift haul recently. And I was drawn to the cover and the title, and I'm just really into reading a lot of poetry and short story lately, and there's some nice photography in here too, just black and white photography. So this book basically is about a time in her life where she settled down in an old house in New Hampshire. It was a European feeling home. She brought with her, more of her European style and a passion for gardening. And she was looking at that time for solitude. So she really, built a nest here. And this book is interesting because it says that the book is dominated by the house itself. Leonard Woolf said in his autobiography, what has the deepest and most permanent effect upon oneself and one's way of living is the house in which one lives. And so that is quoted in the cover of her book. And I'm going to share with you chapter 2, which is nest building. Has anyone ever invested in a house and land whose ignorance was as total as mine? I knew absolutely nothing about houses and next to nothing about country life. I had to depend on a stranger for the men I was hiring, sight unseen, but unfortunately, Mrs. Rundlet proved to be a wise and practical guide. I'm sorry, fortunately. She was good. She wasn't bad. She brought me Earl Nagley as general contractor, a wiry man with keen blue eyes and the gentlest manners. He must have realized at once that he had a tyro on his hands, and took me under his wing. I had, for instance, never heard of sills, so I did not even know how lucky I was that the sills of my house were not rotten, and that the roof was good and solid. I did have definite ideas of what I wanted done, but I hadn't the faintest idea how it was to be done. I wanted air, light, space. I wanted to keep everything that gave the house its distinction, the work of the original builder, but I had no intention of making an historical reconstruction. I saw the house as becoming my own creation within a traditional frame, in much the same way as a poet pours his vision of life into the traditional form of the sonnet. Finally, I was determined to bring the old furniture up from the cellar and into a warm shelter by October 1st. What I told Earl Nagley was, in effect, keep costs down and get me in by October. If he was sometimes dismayed by the impetuous, ignorant poet he had undertaken to work, for he did not show it. We sat down together one June morning on the granite step and drew up the big plans. I was rather reluctant to part with the sheds, but Earl told me that it was impossible to shore them up. As it was, the whole end of the house had been pulled so far askew that the kitchen felt rather like the deck of a ship in a rough sea. Since the sheds would have to go, the possibility opened up of making a new kitchen wall with place for a sink, stove, frigidaire, and built-in cupboards and drawers. Above all, 2 small windows to let in some light. I vetoed traditional pine paneling for the sake of white walls everywhere except in the front hall. I had seen how splendid the old Spanish chests and tables in Santa Fe had looked against white adobe, and besides making a good background for the Flemish furniture, white would reflect all the light the house could hold. What color there was that would be painted on the floors? Only one, in my study, was in good enough condition to be sanded down and waxed. As in the writing of a poem, ideas popped into my head as we went along, and I suddenly remembered that I had been struck on our house-hunting day by a mustard-yellow floor, and how fine some rather elegant old furniture looked standing on it. Why not a yellow kitchen floor? A sour blue for the cabinets? Speaking in terms of color made what we were doing seem real to me, and soon I was beginning to tear out advertisements to show Earl the exact blue and yellow I had in mind. The actual mixing and painting was still months away, of course, and when the time came, we had to experiment a good deal before we could get the colors exactly right. Color was my province, but everything else was in Earl's hands. From finding a space for a bathroom, he managed to squeeze one in behind the stairs, to making a new keyhole for the front door, to building a whole new end of the house, and, horrendous job, getting rid of the privy at the back, and cutting off not only the sheds, but the tons of rubbish that had collected beneath their shaky walls. Those and hundreds of other jobs, small and big, which I do not even know about. Considering how definite my ideas were, it must have seemed strange to the workmen that I did not hover over each stage of the transformation of this broken-down shell into a livable house. I suppose I came about 5 times during the summer to see how things were going. I was too ignorant to realize how many small decisions Earl had to make on his own because I was not there. And when I did come, I was apt to have a new idea and ask casually for some apparently little thing which took time and he had not counted on spending. But he was never discouraging, although he sometimes looked a little quizzical when I insisted, "I have to move in October, come what may." He just smiled and said he would do his best. Earl was an experienced and inventive contractor and carpenter, and I had a pretty clear notion of what I wanted. But I know now that he would never have managed without the guardian angel. He was kept busy seeing to it that the right people turned up at the right moment. How often an unexpected visitor just happened to be there when a crucial decision had to be made. One day late in June, it was Jean Taylor, a painter with a keen eye. She walked in, looked around, and said, "Why don't you knock out that wall between the kitchen and the back room and make one big kitchen living room out of it?" The minute she spoke, I saw how genial an idea she had given us. The present partition contained a closet and a useless flight of back stairs. Once it was taken down, we would have one splendid long room instead of 2 cramped ones, and the box-like structure of the house would be opened up to a new amplitude and variety. Earl sat down with his pad and pencil and made some calculations. That change would mean putting in a whole new 40-foot long floor and one thing, but he too saw that it must be done. Never mind the cost, I said to myself. That room will make the house. And so it has. The long floor still tilts slightly like the deck of a ship, a great place to walk up and down while thinking. What had been the cooking fireplace in the house, it still has a crane in it and ovens to one side, helps make a charming living end to the kitchen. Instead of overheating the shallow little room it dominated before, there I can sit and read while something is cooking, or when I have guests, still be part of the family while I stand at the stove. And the great yellow floor, twice as long as I had thought it would be, is an unending joy, especially in winter, even when on a dark day I seem to be treadling on sunlight. Between visits of the guardian angel, the hard work went on, and once in a while I missed the heavenly land. The hauling off of my fallen-in barn, a piece of work that had loomed large in my mind when I was making the decision to buy, proved to be quite simple and not expensive. The bulldozer is a great invention. It took just a few hours to clear the rubble away. But when I decided to get the loam from my own landfill to fill in what was to become a terraced garden in the foundations, there was no hand on my shoulder to warn me that my decision would make a garden full of rocks and stones on the one hand, and a sad, pitted meadow on the other. I am still struggling with the former. Nature is taking care of the latter, for already the naked places are covered with daisies and black-eyed Susans and wild strawberries. Nevertheless, it was a mistake. Then one day, quite late in the summer, Earl said to me, "About time you told me about that kitchen wall." I had some ideas, but they were rather vague. We had pretty well cleared away what remained here of the life of Dr. Rand, the first owner, when we tore out the sheds, including the one where his boy had slept next to the barn, ready to leap up and harness the horses while the doctor dressed if a call came at night. But I had begged Earl to hang onto 2 sets of square stubby drawers where medicines had been stored. I wanted to build those in. I wanted to keep something here of Dr. Rand's presence, in case a friendly ghost came back looking for our home. I felt a slight panic coming on about that wall when Don Jasinski, an architect, just happened to walk in. He was the last person I expected to see, and he has never been back, but he had clearly got the message. I have not come to the conclusion that there is a guardian angel without considerable evidence. Don looked around for some time, and I will remember the total concentration of that look. We were all silenced by it. Then he sat down on a pile of lumber and with a stubby pencil sketched out the kitchen wall on an old envelope. He set 4 little drawers in horizontally to hold silver, dish towels, and odds and ends, and 3 vertically to one side of the stove. Then, keeping the odd square shape of the drawers, he invented cupboards under the sink and over the stove and Frigidaire. How easy it looked when it was done, and how well the design has served me. Within an hour, Don was on his way, called no doubt somewhere else by someone else's guardian angel. 5 men worked under Earl Nagley's quiet direction, and I learned from all of them. They were my first real contact with life as it would be lived here. There was Tink, for instance, with his pointed head and bright eyes, who looked like an elf. Once when he was eating lunch, sitting around in a chaos of loose boards and tools, Tink told me about the spring, how long it takes to come, how long I would have to wait before I heard the peepers, and the thrill it was when that slight airy singing starts up at last. Good heavens, I had no idea then what a peeper was. The workmen were all gentle people, just as curious about me, this odd fish who was moving into an old house alone to write, as I was about them. And I was learning from them, through my skin, without being really conscious of it. The perfect courtesy of the New Englander, a courtesy born of his own sense of equality with anyone and everyone, rich or poor. I found myself talking not only about sheetrock for the walls, but about my own work, as simply as if we were old friends. The fact is, of course, that a writer feels much closer to any craftsman, to a farmer or a carpenter, to anyone who works with his hands, than he does to clerks or accountants. There's a real affinity between people who make something, as I had learned years before when I felt the same warm communion with the vignerons in the Touraine. There was only one workman whom I never saw because I was away during the week he was here, the chimney man. I heard about the fearful rats' nests he had had to dig out. He did a good job of making all 5 fireplaces workable, in fact. The draught is so good that I hardly need kindling, but he was not an artist, and I have paid for my absence at a crucial time ever since. The new bricks have been set in with too wide an interstice of cement, and making a jarring sight underneath the beautifully carved mantels. Luckily, I am not a perfectionist about some things, and at first I was so happy lighting wood fires everywhere that I hardly noticed the poor workmanship. The reader must remember that the climate of New England is phenomenally various, the temperature in a single year running anywhere from over 100 degrees to minus 30 degrees, so a livable house has to be snug, and one must be able to depend on the machinery working through blizzards, extreme heat, sharp freezes, and God knows what hazards and pressures. Now that the frame of the house was standing at last, it was time to call in the expert who would be busy under the floors and in the cellar, putting in sewage pipes, a furnace, running water in the kitchen and bathroom, and a cesspool out near the barn. I had been lucky in my contractor and was equally so in Belland Pierce, of the firm that bears his name, Belland, who is a good deal younger than I am, took a fatherly interest in my problems and did a superb job for me. Although so efficient and high-powered, he appreciates the eccentric and respects the person who wants to save where it is possible. When I asked him whether he could possibly find for me an old-fashioned tub on legs, for I dislike the slow, slippery, low modern bathtubs, he smiled an amused smile and suggested that I come down to the store and he would see what he could do. There I found an Aladdin's cave of ancient appliances of all kinds. Not only just the tub I wanted for a song, but even better, a second-hand stove and a second-hand Frigidaire. John Elwes would have been in heaven. It is not necessarily true in New England, despite the legend, that all workmen and contractors are honest, or temper the wind to the shorn lamb. But it is a fact that no one who worked on rebuilding this house took advantage of my ignorance in any way. When, as the years went on, I did occasionally get badly rooked by one workman or another, I looked back to the first days with a shiver of relief, a kind of apprehension in reverse, to think what might have happened had I fallen among thieves instead of among my good friends Earl Nagley and Belland Pierce. By September, it really looked as if I might be able to move in on schedule. I'm sure Earl had moments of doubt, and the last weeks were pretty active and tense, as I came in and out to measure and remeasure just where the furniture would go, to help mix the paint, to bring rolls of wallpaper for the hall. There was no time now to sit and eat a leisurely lunch and talk of peepers. I walked around with a pad and pencil, making lists of absolute necessities, then dashed back to Cambridge to buy beds, kettles, blankets, towels, lamps, end tables, the 101 things one has to think of when moving into a cold, empty house. When it came to beautiful objects, I had inherited a rich store from Channing Place, but I was rather weak on ordinary useful things like a toaster or a laundry basket. At this point, the miracle of friendship, which has come to renew the mystique of the house so many times since, began to manifest itself. My friends realized that my whole relation to the place was a little like that of an old maid who suddenly gets married, and pieces of their lives began to come to me to share in the adventure. So Rosalind Green gave me her mother's old wing chair to sit beside the fireplace, and she and her daughter Katrine had it recovered for me. At that time, I did not have a single comfortable chair and had decided that I could not afford to buy one. But I had dreamed of a wing chair, and here it was, wafted to me on the wings of love. With that blessed chair came 3 objects to set about the fireplace, objects that spoke to me vividly of childhood summers I had spent under the wing of the Greens at their river houseland, set above the small marshes of Rowley, Massachusetts. That house no longer exists, pushed aside by a new road. But here at Nelson, the Hessians, with their ineffable smiles and support the big logs support the big logs from my woods. The 5-foot-tall flat shovel takes out ash to lay around my rose bushes in spring, and the little low bench where we all sat as children is there before the fire, waiting for Katrine, who always sat down at it at once, stretching out her long legs whenever she came to stay. Katrine has died since I came here, so she is one of the presences who come and go at this strange intersection where I do not live in time, but where past and future flow together into the present as gently as the currents of air that sometimes make the curtains stir as if a hand has just touched them. But in September of 1958, I was much too anxious about immediate practical problems to think of anything else. For the final month, I behaved like a hen trying to gather together 1,000 chickens. For every time I drove up from Cambridge with a load, I discovered some obvious lack I had never even imagined. One day, Earl and I suddenly realized that no plans for light over the sink and stove had been made. I dashed down to Sears Roebuck in Keene for long fluorescent lights, just in time for him still to be able to mask them before he began to paint the cupboards. When the bathtub and wash bowl had been installed, it occurred to me that towels do have to be hung, and that a mirror and medicine cabinet are not bad ideas in a bathroom. But at last, everything was in order, and I was able to tell George Gardner that he could bring around a truck on October 1st as planned. Mr. Gardner is a Cambridge institution, a Negro who began as handyman and gardener, but has long since become an entrepreneur with trucks and men at his command. I had not expected him to come along himself, but he said, "I wouldn't think of letting your father's furniture go up alone, Miss Sarton. I'll be there to watch out for it. Besides, I want to see that house of yours." So a little touch from the past, from dear Channing Place, would be with me on that tremendous day. So I think that is a super charming, lovely book. Definitely, a couple of words there of the times. And yeah, she just sounds like such a fascinating person. I think I love her spirit of like how, she shows love and respect for people. I clearly understand why people are drawn to her and why they want to help her or be employed by her. And when they are employed by her, like they want to take care of her. I think, there's something about people, and sometimes it's hard to pinpoint exactly what it is when you meet them, but it's like they just embody this way of like sort of knowing who you are, or knowing like the important things about you that connect to them. And like, it's not often that you meet people like that. And I think a lot of people I'm drawn to have some aspect of that about them. I'm really attracted to spending time with artists of all kinds, musicians, writers, poets, not just visual artists. Like, honestly, I think I haven't even found as many engaging visual artists as I have writers and musicians. And I'm not sure if that's just my experience, but I think I've been in situations, be it in art school or be it like being a fan of a certain artist, maybe they give more of themselves to their work than they do to other people a lot of the time. And I'm not blanketing that statement in any way to all artists or anything, but like I've seen that. I've actually, I think myself, gone through phases in life where I have been that. I think I have invested myself less in friendships and relationships at certain times because I was just so utterly drawn to my art. And like, even at this stage of my own life, I spend, a balanced amount of time working here in my studio, but it's like, I do think a lot about how much time am I spending with my family, how much time am I spending, on work, how much time am I, taking care of myself. And like, I won't lie, there are definitely times where it's been imbalanced, but I'm never, how do I say this the right way? Like, I never want to take much time away from my art. So what I find with musicians and writers is like part of their art and their study is finding those human stories. And it's not to say that visual artists don't also have to do that, because I think many do, not all, but many. But when you're writing, and when you're making music, it's really hard to do that alone, like in a mental space where you're just alone, because it doesn't require working with your hands. It requires working with your mind. And I think that might be why I find they can be some of the best people to be around. There's like a storytelling bug that lives inside them. And I think I am also that kind of person. And I try to be pretty conscious of like, not giving enough of myself to different things. But I'll admit it's something I struggle with. I'm a really busy person, and when I'm not busy, like I make myself more busy because I'm excited about a lot of things. Like I want to make things. I want to make something from nothing. I want to like discover and explore and go places I haven't been, and like not in a grandiose way, but just like, on a nature walk or something. I just want to see the tiny little things that I'll find in the, in this hole in a tree or something. I don't know what it is, but like I feel all of that about her, how she talks about people and even objects. And like I think that's kind of what attracted me to Plant Dreaming Deep, is it just really embodies that whole feeling. And listening to her talk about her contractor, her guardian angel, or her person who had all the guardian angels, it makes me think a lot about, like, I could see my dad being that person, like working for someone and making it all happen in this magical way, because he's actually done that for me many times. He's just made all these chaotic things make sense, or he's fixed something, and it's been really great. And even in my professional career, like those people, that's another kind of a spark. Like I'm very fortunate to work with a couple of women right now who, like, they work in a capacity where they support me in my job, and both of them, they're like my lifelines. They take so much chaos that I have going on, and they put it in a box for me, and they make other people do their part. They make it all make sense. So like, if you are lucky enough to have people like that in your life, or definitely at work, hold on to them and treat them with so much kindness, because they're so important to like everything working. Like the whole machine stops if you don't have those people. And I think they're also just really good for everyone's mental health. I don't know how they do what they do, because like I'm not that at all. I think I create more chaos than anything else, but like not in a negative way, but like I'm going to ask too many questions. I'm going to talk for far too long. I'm going to say things in a really long way instead of a concise way a lot of the times. And I might go on side quests. Like I just do that. It's a thing, right? And we all have those kind of like personal reflections. But yeah, anyways, I'm kind of rambling, but like I really enjoyed that story, that chapter of this book, and I highly recommend this book, this author. Thank you for joining me. I hope you had a cup of tea or something and you just kind of were able to ponder and listen to this while you were doing whatever you were doing. I will talk to you again very soon. I am going to continue with this series because I really like it. I think it's therapeutic in a lot of ways. So until next time, take good care of you. Bye for now.